Hi everyone. Yeah, hi Yash, Dinesh, Keshav, Saurabh, Karthik. Yeah, I'm also excited to get this session. Hi Sudhakar, Yash. Yeah, I'm good. Hope you guys are also doing well. Hi Saurabh. Yeah, thank you, Shani. Okay, so hope my voice is audible. Right. Just put thumbs up in the comment section so that I can know. Okay, audible. Great, great. Okay, so just let's wait for 2 more minutes, then we are going to start the session. Okay, so let me share my screen. I have created a sort of presentation. Okay, so yeah, I think we can start. Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Rahul. Uh, I have done my BTech in computer science and engineering. So, and currently I am working as a software developer at Geeksforgeeks. So, and it's almost going to be 2 years. And my major responsibility is to develop the user interfaces and uh, work on the UI part. So this course is basically includes the front-end development and the React.js. So we are going to have multiple sessions in the upcoming weeks as well. And so before moving to the React.js, we are going to cover some basic topics that we need to know if we are going to learn React. So we will be learning about the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, like the basics of it, so that when we start off with the React, so we should have some prior knowledge about this basic stuff. So in this session, first we are going to know like what is front-end development and all about HTML we should know. Okay, so I have created this as basically presentation using HTML and CSS. So let's get started with it. Okay, so these are the topics we are going to cover in this session. So first is like what is front-end development, and secondly like all about HTML we should know. HTML tags, attributes, basic markup, and the HTML default display properties, HTML forms, document object model, and HTML semantics. And lastly, we are going to like set up our editor so that we can develop our code in much easier way. Okay, so moving to our first topic. So yeah, so what is front-end development? So basically, front-end development is also known as client-side development, and it is just the practice of developing the user interfaces so that the end users can interact with it. So let's say this is a browser, this is an application, right? So the thing I am seeing is basically a front-end engineered product, right? So that I am able to interact with it, and the objective is to objective is to create user interfaces keeping user interaction in mind, so that it can allow ease to users to navigate through the data. So let's say this application, we have multiple tabs, right? So it allows us to toggle between multiple screens and navigate through the data. And even in this viewport we are seeing this. So basically I am acting as an end user, and this is the front end I am interacting with. Now for any website, HTML is the basics, is the backbone of any website development process. And front end development manages everything that users visually see on their application and in their browser. Now, as a front-end developer, your responsibility would be, you will be responsible for the looks, the feel, and ultimately the design of the website you are creating, right? Okay, so moving forward. Okay, so about HTML. So the HTML, the HTML was created by the Tim Berners-Lee in 1991, and since then it has been evolved much. And currently, the latest version of HTML we are using is HTML5. And HTML is you can consider it as a building block of any website, right? Now, it stands for the hypertext markup language. Hypertext means the linking of web pages, and markup language basically considers a text documentation with the tag that describes the structure of the web pages. Now, by describing the structure, we mean describing the layout so that the browser can know like what content to be rendered, right? Now, HTML contain various nested elements, tags, and all of that stuff. Now, as we said, like it tells browser how to display, and the extension we generally use to save the HTML file is HTML and HTM. So HTML extension was used previously due to some constraints. Now we use HTML extension, although both are compatible. And so if I have to explain HTML using an example, I would say consider a sofa or couch. It may have a great cushion and fabric, but the inner structure is made out of wood, right? Now that structure is HTML. Now that structure defines how our website will look, right? Now the browser does not render the tags. Instead, you make use of those tags to render the content, right? Okay. Now HTML elements and tags. Okay, so every HTML document is made up of some elements, right? Now, as HTML is a markup language, it make use of series of elements, tags, which is basically used to wrap our content so that it can be displayed on the screen or any media or any other media. Now, HTML elements are made out of tags. Now, there are various tags supported in HTML. Now, every HTML can have various different properties, various different attributes, which provides additional information about those elements. So let's say there are three properties which can be used with any HTML element. That can be ID, class, and style tag. Now, ID can have ID is basically unique for every element. You can give same ID to multiple elements, but it will, if you are using that particular ID in your CSS or JavaScript, it is going to create some difficulties if you are using that particular ID to do some interaction or something like that, right? Now class attribute is basically to define styling based on that particular class. Now the anatomy. Okay, so the anatomy is basically anatomy of an element is basically it contains a starting tag and the closing tag. Closing tag just have a slash forward slash and the content in between. So this complete makes a element. Now elements can be nested in one another. Every HTML document has some nested elements. So there are some tags. So let's start with the root tag. So HTML. HTML is the root element of an HTML document, right? Now it is also referred to as an root element. And the head, it contains the metadata about the document. And meta tag, it represents the metadata which may be used by the crawlers for indexing of the page. It basically can have the description, the content you want to convey through your page, through your web page. And the link tag. Link tag basically specifies the relationship between the external resource with respect to your current document. And the title. It defines the document title. Let's say we are seeing this, the Frontend React Live 2021. So this is the title. We can set it using this particular tag. Now the sectioning root, body tag. Now the body tag represents the content. Okay. It represents the content of the HTML document, which we visually see in the browser. The content with the head tag, it does not is not visually rendered. Instead, used by the crawlers or the browsers to get the information about the document. Now there are certain tags which we use inside the body, which can be div tag, which basically specifies division in the document. Horizontal tag, which basically gives a thematic break, a horizontal rule. A UL tag for the unordered list, and the OL tag for the ordered list, and LI tag for which defines basically a list item according to your the parent, the UL or OL. It can be unordered or it can be ordered. If unordered, it won't have any numeric bulleting. In order tag, it will have a numeric bulleting. And in pre-tag, we are going to have some pre-formatted text, so that let's say if we want to give some piece of code, and if we directly use HTML, it won't consider any white space. So we are going to look a few of those tags. And the anchor element. The anchor element basically used to create the hyperlink so that the user can be redirected to multiple web pages, or we can also link the email, the phone number, right? Now the B tag for bring attention to an element, break tag to create a line break, so that whenever the consecutive test is written, it will be rendered on from the new line. The span is to create a generic inline container. It also specifies a section in the document, strong keywords. So let's say if I have a paragraph, an article, and I want to give a certain keyword some importance, make it stand out of from rest of the text, so I can wrap it around the strong tag. Now the small tag is basically used for printing small text, so that let's say if I want to highlight or maybe give smaller text to a specific content, I can wrap it around the small tag. Now there are certain media tags. Now the video and the audio tags were not supported in the older versions of HTML, but HTML5 supports these tags, so that the video and audio can be directly embedded into our web page. And the image tag basically used to embed an image into the document. Similarly, the video, it embeds a media player. And the map maker, it makes use of the area element to define a clickable area on the image. maybe we can map it based on the coordinates. Now the script tag is basically used to embed the executable code. So let's say if we have some piece of JavaScript, if we want to provide some functionality, we can include the script, the canvas to draw the graphics and maybe animations like charts we see. So it is based on the canvas. And the iframe. Iframe is basically to include another HTML page into our page. So let's say if we want to embed a PDF, if we want to embed a PDF into our web page, we can make use of this tag. Okay. So yeah, a few HTML elements have does not contain any content. So these kinds of elements are known as empty elements. So if we have to see about those tags, so let's say horizontal tag, it does not contain any sort of content. It's just a single tag. So and the break tag, image tag, image tag does not have any content. Instead, it takes some attributes like source, alternate, class, style, ID, right? Okay, so we are going to like look about some of the tags. So far, like if any questions we have. Okay, about markup language and programming language. Yeah. Okay, so HTML is a markup language, right? So it does not basically it is not a general purpose language. It does not support if else or either the oops concept. And let's say the JavaScript. JavaScript is a general purpose language. It supports if else logic, oops concept. So yeah, markup language is just for the describing the layout, right? Okay. Okay, so moving forward. Okay, so now we are going to look at the basic markup. So I really don't have anything to show in this particular slide. So just look at the code, what is the basic markup. So this contains the basic markup and a set of navigation links so that I can go to the next page and previous page accordingly. Okay, so this is I'm using the VS Code. Okay, so the basic markup. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so this is the basic markup of HTML, or the doc type HTML. Why doc type HTML is required? Doc type HTML is required so that the browser can know which version of HTML we are using. So let's say if I don't declare this doc type tag, so then the browser will go into a quirks mode. Now that is a technique used by some of the browsers so that they can render the the tags based on the best guess, because they don't know like which version of HTML we are using. So it is preferred to declare the doc type at the starting of your HTML document. It does not have a closing element, closing tag, and the root, the HTML. So it is basically the root element and the language. This is basically an attribute so that the browser can know which type of language we are using. So EN is the abbreviation for the English. Now head tag. Head tag, okay, zoom in the code, sure. I guess it is visible now. So head tags contains the metadata about the document, and these three tags are basically default tags. So this is basically meta tags basically describe the meta information. Now char set UTF-8. A UTF is basically the universal characters tag with 8 bits of encoding. So basically it includes all the characters that might have included in this document, and this is for the compatibility. And this tag is basically for the scaling purposes so that your website can be responsive according to the device. And the title. Title is basically for the, let's say we have defined some title so that the browser can have this title. Let's say I have defined this title, right? Basic markup of HTML document. So it is viewed in the tab of the browser. So let's say if I want to have an image here, let's say this is the default image provided by the browser. Let's say if I want to have an image, I can define a link tag. We are going to like later on in this session, we are going to like set up the these plugins so that you can, you know, using the just the link and the tag is rendered accordingly. So let's say if I define an icon and the hyper reference, let me quickly pull up that reference. Let's say if I want to just give it a HTML5. This is I have this image in my other directory. So as you see, like now this is the icon that is being rendered because we have defined a link tag with the relationship of icon. So this is the the head contains the meta information, right? Now the link tag, now the browser is parsing this tag and it finds the relationship of icon and puts this particular icon in the tab and the body tag. It is basically a sectioning tag. The content between this is visually rendered based on the subsequent tags. So let's say we have defined a section with attribute class containing the value navigation and some anchor tags hyperlinking to our pages. So it can have like we can go to the previous page and the next page, right? Okay, and the closing tags, right? So this is the basic markup, and you can modify it accordingly according to the requirements, right? Okay, so let's make use of some of the tags which we have. Let's create a file. On that pre-formatting, we are going to install the plugins later on. Let's define a title. Let's say we want to use the UL tag. The UL tag, it can have a light tag. Right. I can open this page. So my list is rendered unordered list. Let's say if I want to render a ordered list, I can make use of the OL tag. So now I have a ordered list, right? Now let's take the pre tag. Okay, so let's say you have some piece of code, right? Now let's say we have some piece of code and we want to render it. So let's define a division and say we are using the JavaScript. We have two variables. Right. Now if we save this, it is rendered in a single line, but we don't want that. We want to like render it as we put it inside the code. But by default, it is not taking this white space into the account. We can do this by using the making the use of pre tag. So let's say we have this is equal to, now if we see, right. So by making the use of this pre tag, our code is rendered as we want it with some padding also. Now regarding the padding and the styling, we are going to talk about that in the upcoming sessions. All right. Now we can take, I guess, the iframe tag also. Let's say I have defined the iframe tag. Now frame border defines the frame border if we want to have it. Now the source. which document you want to load in that particular frame. So let's say I want to load my index file, right? So I can give the path. I also need to set some default width. So let's say I defined a width of 1,000 and height of 500. So now if we see, great. So now that particular iframe is containing my document. Another document is being rendered in that iframe, right? We can even interact with it. Great. So let's say if some site does not want its site to be rendered into the iframe. Now there can be some server-side settings which the developer can do, so that it is enabled by default. But let's say if we want to render some other site, google.com, see if we can access this. We cannot access this because they might have disabled this particular feature, so that we can't access that particular layout in our iframe. Okay, so let's see if we can make use of another tag. Okay, I guess all the other tags are descriptive enough. So there are multiple different tags which we can use, and are going to learn about that in the upcoming slides also. Okay, so if you guys have any sort of question related to the tags, you can have it. Okay, so what is metadata? Okay, so metadata is just the meta information about your document. So let's say if you Google something or put like search something in any search engine, you will see a list of items, list of hyperlinkings, right? So that basically that is the metadata you see. That is inside your the head, the information. Maybe the document has some title. Maybe document has some meta information like name and content. So let's say. Okay, so one more cool thing I'm going to show you. So let's say, okay, so for this particular page, HTML tags, let's access this. Okay, so let's put a meta tag with name equal to maybe description. The content is sample page for HTML tags. Okay, now if we save it, it does not make any difference in our page. It will be rendered as it is, the previous. But there is something, let's say, okay, so let's talk about it. Let's say, okay, so let's say if you want to debug your code, debug your front-end code, you can make use of the elements which is provided by the browser. It is provided by almost every browser. So using the elements, you can debug your code. Let's say we have this HTML. We have this HTML document. It is similar to the document we have here. It is rendered in this. We can directly change this document, put some information. Like it is just a debugging tool for the developers. And okay, so head contains the meta tag, right? The description and the content. Let's say you have created a HTML document, and you want to check like how uh, basically to check the semantics, like how good it is, whether it will be accessible or not. So you can make of this tool, the Lighthouse. It is basically provided by the Chrome browser. So let's say it is basically used to check the performance of your website, how it is performing, the best practices are used or not. So let's say if I want to check the report from the for the desktop, you can just generate the report and see how it goes. It does some automated process. And okay, voila. So we have some, the performance is great, the accessibility is great, even the SEO is great. but we are lagging in some of the best practices. Now we can also debug that using this. Let's say, okay, okay, so maybe this is due to the live reloading, I guess. The live plugin I'm using to reload the web pages automatically. So let's say we have defined that meta tag, right? So let's hide this and again generate a report. Let's clear this one and again generate a report. Let's see. Okay, so again it is producing the same result. This is again. Okay, so maybe we have to remove this particular thing. But meta tag is basically for the providing the meta information. So what is the difference between class and div tags? Okay, so div is a tag, class is not a tag. Class is basically an attribute which can be given to the tag. So it can be given to any other tag for maybe for the styling purposes or for performing any, any sort of manipulation using the JavaScript, right? So it is not a tag. Okay. Now we have seen like, okay, so this is the console, like if any error using the JavaScript, it can be provided here. Right. We can also see like what sort of styling we have by default. So now moving forward. Okay, so we have seen the basic markup. Okay, so here comes the default display property of HTML elements. Now every HTML element has a default display property, though it can be overridden by making use of the CSS, but every HTML has a default property, primarily two default values. It can be either block level or inline level. Now, what do we mean by the block level elements? So block level elements are basically, it always starts from the new line. Moreover, it takes the full width available. Starting from the left, it stretches up to the right. It takes all the width. And it also respects the margin and the padding we have given to that particular element. Now the inline elements, it does not start from the new line, neither it does not respect the margin and the padding, and it only takes the width as much as it requires. So if we want to visually see the things, so let's create another file. Give it a title of HTML. Let's say I have defined a div tag. I've defined some dummy text maybe. I have a div tag inside a div tag which also contains some dummy text and another some dummy text. So if you want to visually see it, I'm going to make use of style tag to define some styles, to define some internal styles for the elements. Let's say if I have a div inside a div, you can ignore the styling if you don't know about it. We are going to cover that in the coming sessions. So let's say I want to give it a background color yellow. Margin of, so first we'll see that a border of 1 pixel. Great. So let's see how it looks. Yeah. Okay, so now you can see we have defined the content inside a div tag. Now we have defined a div tag inside a div tag. Now that div tag is basically started from the new line and it takes the complete width that is available. So that is the block level elements. And let's say if we give it a padding of 10 pixels. If we see like a padding is wrapped around the content, let's say with a margin of 1 pixel. So we have like we can see like there is a margin across. Let's say give it a margin 50 pixels. So now it is now visually we can see like a padding is around 50 pixels. So let's say if we have a div tag containing some content, we have a span element. Now span has a default display property that is inline. So let's say if we give it a dummy text, some dummy text, and the same styling. So let's say what is the difference between these two? Okay, great. Let's give it a section. So now we can see like uh, in that particular in the inline elements, we can also check like the display value for these. We can make use of the cursor, the inspection tool provided by the browser. So now this span, these are the properties that we have given, right? And the default display is inline, right? So as we can see, like the padding and the margins are not respected here. So like in many cases or in some sort of cases, you might have required some padding to these elements. So how it can be fixed? We can also give it some display property. So let's say if I give it a display property of inline block, so it will be behaving as an inline as well as the block, like the conjunction, right? So now you can see like all of the things are like the padding and margin is being respected, but still the element is inline because the consecutive text starts from the ending of this span tag, right? But in this case, the text is started from the new line, right? So there is a tag. Okay, so we have like to know about the inline and the block level elements. So we have a property that is inline block, right? So there is a like there are certain tags which behaves as inline block in HTML. So if any of you guys know about that particular tag, you can uh, comment in the section. Otherwise, I'm going to talk about it anyway. Anyone? Yeah, hello Sandeep Rapoli. Okay, so we have an HTML element that is image. Now that HTML element, HTML tag behaves as an inline block. Though according to the documentation specifications, it is an inline element, but it behaves as an inline block because in that case, both margin and padding is respected, even though it is an inline element. So let's say if we have a div, let's say we have some content image tag. An image tag by default has source and alternate text. So let's say if we define some image, I have this image with me, and the alternate text may be HTML image. Now, why alternate tag is used? Now, alternate tag is quite useful. Let's say if some user has very slow network connection, the image cannot be loaded, right? So the alternate the content within this tag within this attribute is being shown alternatively. Also it is used by the screen readers. Okay, so let's define some tag text. Now let's define the same CSS for the image tag as well. Okay, great. Okay, so let's give it some styling. So let's give it some inline styling. So let's say I want the width just to be let's say 100 pixels. Great. Now as you can see, it is an inline tag, right? But the padding is this, and the margin which we have given here is being respected in this. So it behaves as an inline block element by default, right? Okay. Okay, so David, we are not going to too deep in the meta tag. But if you have any specific question regarding the meta tag, we can have it. Yeah, hi Ankit. Okay, so we can move further. So we have learned about the default display value of the HTML elements. Moving further. Okay, so now we have HTML forms. Okay, so height of image becomes ineffective if we are defining the width. No, if we have defined just the width while styling, the ratio is maintained. The height will be adjusted accordingly. Now, if we want to, let's say, the height is set to auto by default. If we give it some certain pixel of height, let's say in this, say if I give it a height of 50 pixels, so it will be adjusted, but the ratio won't be that good. The aspect ratio is not maintained in this case, right? So it's better to keep it by default auto, so that the aspect ratio is maintained in that particular case. All right. Okay, so back to the HTML forms. So HTML forms are very powerful tool for interacting with the users. Now by interaction, I mean like let's say you are on an e-commerce platform. You have some added products in your cart. While checking out, if you do not have your address pre-filled, maybe a form will be popped up so that you can enter your address so that the product can be delivered accordingly, right? Now, HTML forms are basically for the collecting the data from the users, maybe allowing them to control the UI even. So let's say in certain apps, in certain websites, you may have seen there is a grid system, a three-way grid, a four-way grid, a five-way grid. You can control the UI. You can even see like how much you can see, how much the products you want to see in a particular line. So that all we can do using the HTML forms. Now the form tag. The form tag is basically used to create HTML form. All the input wrapper, all the elements, the form elements are wrapped inside the form tag. Now I have seen like many of the websites which just make use of the input tags, does not contain a wrapper, that is the form tag. So it also creates a form, but it is very nice to have a wrapper, form tag wrapper, so that even the browser can know that this is a particular form, right? Okay, and the HTML form, HTML input element is one of the most used element, and it can be rendered in many different ways based on the type attribute. So the type attribute can be text, radio, password, search, date, button, submit. So it can have many different values, and various form elements are input, select, text area, opt group, label for defining the label of that particular input we are taking. And it is also nice to have the label because so that the users can see like what input, like what sort of input is required from their side, right? And the data list for entering the predefined set of list. And the form tag attributes can be action, method, target, and encoding type. Now, the action attribute is required whenever you want to process the form on the server side. Like, let's say if I defined a particular URL in this particular attribute and I submit the form, the data is being sent to that particular specified URL, and the method can be get or post. Now, usually when we submit the form, post method is required. Post method is generally used basically. And the target can be self or blank, or it can be in a different tab, right? And the encoding type. The encoding type is basically whenever you submit a form, in the headers, in the request headers, the response header, there is a field that is content type. Now that content type is necessary for specifying what sort of data you are sending or retrieving. Now, if you have a normal form, the application x www form URL encoded content type is encoding type is used. Now, let's say if you have a binary image or some sort of media in your form that needs to be uploaded, you use multi-part form data because uh, according to the specifications, for every non-alphanumeric byte, non-alphanumeric character, 3 bit is being used. Now, if you have a binary data, and you are using this content type, the payload size is going to be very significant. That might create some problems on the server side while submitting the form, while even parsing the form, right? Okay, so we can create a form to see like how these form elements work, right? Okay, so let's create a file. So just let me know if I'm going way too fast. I don't want any action. I don't want to say we have this right. Now we can have input by default the text. Let's say the text, and we can also define a property attribute which is placeholder. The default text which is being returning, right? The input of type maybe email, placeholder, enter your email. One more thing, we have defined this, the type email, right? Let's say if we have put a property that is required, right? So this also provides us the front-end validation, the browser level validation. Let's say we are going to test it, but let's say if we have given it a text and the placeholder is enter your email, even if the format of email is not being followed, the form will be submitted. But if we give a type email, now if the user does not enter the proper format of an email, the browser will throw an error. Okay, and the type password, placeholder, enter password. It is also required. Now the required attribute is for that this field is required. It is descriptive enough though. Right. It can also have like certain properties. Let's say the type text, placeholder, read only area. Say we have defined this, give this a property of read only. So let's see how this looks. Right. So by default, the input elements are in line, right? So in this read-only area, I cannot input anything because this is just read-only, right? So let's give it some default styling. We have, let's say display give it a block padding of maybe 10 pixels. Now margin 10 pixels. Right. Let's say if we want the width to be at least 200 pixels. Great. So now we have our form, the basic form. We can also define some maybe select with have name and ID, and maybe define some default options. So by default, let's say select options. There would get some options. Right. And I want the same styling to be applied to the select. Right. Okay. Right. So it does have the options I have specified. Right. So we can have various different. Let's say if I want to have an input of some range. So I have this toggle, the interacting one, so that we can fetch the value accordingly. We can also define some attributes, and great. We can also have some Yeah, we can like implement all sorts of input according to the needs and the needs that a form is the type of input in the form is required. Let's say if I define an input of type submit, give it a value submit, right? Now while submitting the form, now as we have given the required attributes, now these fields are required, right? So let's give it a name, enter an email. So let's enter the wrong one, right? Enter the password. The use of this, it is being hidden, right? Now the read-only area, we cannot enter any sort of input. Even if we don't select any option, it won't throw any browser level error because we have not given the required attribute. Now if we submit it, now you can see, please include @ in the email address. So yeah, it does not ensure like the complete validation, just the browser level, the basic validations, right? If you hover it, it shows a title. Please include an HTML @. Moreover, like if you want to give it a custom, let's say we can see like please include an HTML in the email address. We want to give it to any element. You can just define a title here. Enter your name. Right. Now, if we hover it for like 2-3 seconds, we can see that. Right. Enter your name. Okay, so I have zoomed in. Okay, so we can make use of different kind of forms, specify some CSS on these forms to make it look good. All right. We are going to learn about the styling in the upcoming sessions as well. Okay. Now moving towards the next. Okay. Can we also do styling on the title of the tags? Title of the tags, as in, yeah, like using the CSS, you can just directly apply the styles on the tags, but it is not recommended unless you have very small web page, because let's say you have defined some styles on the div tag, and the div tag is used in every page multiple times, so it will be applied to all the elements present in the page. Okay, which is more suitable, display block or flex? Though it depends on the requirement. If you are creating a flex container, then the flex is required. If you are creating a block level element, so the display block is required. Though we are going to talk about the display properties in, maybe in depth in the upcoming CSS sessions. Okay, so we can move forward. Okay, so the document object model. So document object model is basically a very fundamental topic. So what is document object model basically? So document object model is basically an interface that represents how your HTML or XML documents, that represents how HTML and XML documents are read by the browser. Now, it does not represent any logical relationship. It does not represent any logical relationship. Instead, the structure, logical structure. Now, it allows a language that is JavaScript to manipulate the structure and styling of our website. Now, the JavaScript is basically a scripting language. Now, it does not understand what HTML tags are. So, like whenever like the browser reads our HTML document, parallelly it creates a different representation of a HTML document that is DOM. Now it defines like it also defines how that tree can be accessed. Now the HTML document, in our HTML documents we have multiple tags elements, right? Now the each element is converted into an object. All right. Now, what is an object? Object is basically it is a property. It is having an attribute as well as a function or method which is basically used to operate on that attribute. Now, document object model is basically the different representation of HTML document in different format. So let's say we have our the basic structure, the basic markup. So this is the basic markup, right? Now, if we see, we have the doc type for the versioning. Now, the HTML is the root level element. So we have this at the top. Now, document object model is a tree-like structure creating objects. Now we have two child elements, that is head and body, right? So we collapse it. We have two childs, right? The head and the body. Now head further contains the meta tags, the title, the link, right? Now the head contains the meta tag, title, the style. It like this particular thing. Let's say we have the style. Okay. So this is also included in the DOM, right? Now the title contains certain text, right? Now that is the text node. This, right? Now every maybe some of the elements can have attributes. Now attributes are defined on the starting tags, so those applied those are created into the attribute nodes. Now we have the body tag. Now in body tag we have defined a section which further contains our links, right? Now body tag has a section which contains our navigation links, which further contains our text, that is previous and next, right? So an anchor tag has an attribute which contributes to the attribute node, that is hyperreferences, hyperlinking, right? So this is the DOM. Now, like what is the use of DOM? DOM is basically it is basically just the different representation which JavaScript uses. The document object model, these objects are used by the JavaScript so that it can enhance, it can enforce user interactivity. We can manipulate the elements. We can even change anything that is inside our HTML document, right? So now primarily there are different kind of nodes in the document object model, but primarily we are going to talk about like these document element and attribute and text node. The document node is the complete node. Let's say if you want to see, inspect, then we can move to the document. We can access it by just writing the document. So this is the complete node containing our complete document, right? Now the element node, let's say this head is an element, right? So we can access it by using this. This is our element node. Document is dot body is also an element node, right? Now the attribute node. Attribute is node like let's see it, nodes. So we have two attribute nodes. It defines like all the types of node we have in this particular document. All right, now the text node, like we have defined the title, the previous, the next. These are all the text nodes, right? So the document object model, we can talk about that in the JavaScript session as well. All right. Okay, so we can have some questions. Okay, so whenever I inspect any website, okay, I didn't get your question, Manshu. Okay, so we can move forward. HTML semantics. Now, HTML semantics is basically what is semantics? Semantic is basically a word with a meaning, right? Now, semantic HTML offers meaning as well, along with the representation of our structure of the layout, right? Now, it provides information about the content of those tags. Yeah. So let's say we have a text enclosed in our code tag. There is a code tag present in the HTML. Now, if we have some piece of code or some snippet, basically, if we wrap it around the code so that the browser can even know, like, there must be some type of code, some type of language inside that particular tag, right? Let's say we have a HTML tag article. Now, if any developer see or even the browser parse it, So the browser has better meaning about that particular elements, that the content within those tag is basically an article. Now the purpose of HTML semantic is to provide more accessibility across all different type of communities, enterprises, even the applications. Now it helps in the search engine optimizations. It can also help the screen reader, which is basically to help the visually impaired people, and also helps the developer. Let's say if I've defined some article or something like that and wrapped it on the article tag, so the developer can directly know like must be an article or maybe an article, right? Defines meaning along with the presentation. So we have different kinds of semantic tags. Now the header. The header is basically specifies header for the document, and the navigation defines a set of navigation links. Now, the every link, like let's say you have multiple links on your web page, you should not define all the links inside the nav tag. Nav tag, if you are using the HTML semantics, it should contain only the major links so that it can be read by the screen readers mainly, right? A section defines a section in the document. The main, basically main tag specifies main content of the document. Article tag defines the self-contained content. This is basically going to an article, right? Mark basically specifies the highlighted text. The time defines the date and time. Now these two tags are quite interesting: details and summary. Now detail tag, the user can hide or view. Now these two tags are less used, but provides a very useful way of hide and show by default. And the footer tag defines a footer for the document. Right. So let's look at these two tags: details and summary. Okay, so let's put in this document. Let's say if I have defined a section which contains my details tag, I have a summary. Let's say HTML documentation. I have a p tag which contains some dummy text or the text about the HTML. Right? Now, if we see it, so let's hide it. Now, now we can see like we have this, right? So on clicking on this particular element, we get the view of the inside the whatever inside the details tag. So it is a very good way of like if you have multiple tab, basically in web development, like we call it the accordion, right? So this is a default tag behavior of the detail and summary. The summary tag is for the title, giving the title, and this is the content. So it is adjusted. It takes the height according to the content, right? All right. Okay, so like what's the use of HTML semantics? So HTML semantics should be followed so that a wide range of people can access this according to and it is also enhance the search engine optimization, right? Okay, so we have covered all the slides that we have. So now we can uh, go to the editor setup, and you can ask your questions in the comment section if you guys have any. Look at the editor setup. So here I'm using the Visual Studio Code, and I have downloaded some of the plugins. That is, first of all, I have installed Beautify, basically to format my HTML code. So let's say if I have some indentation issues, right? So if I select all the text and format the document, it will be formatted according to the configurations, the default configurations, right? So this is a pretty good extension. just for the HTML and few more languages, I guess. And I'm using a live server, which is basically to reload my HTML pages on the go, so that I don't have to keep it refreshing every time I made some change. So whenever you are on a page and you want to, when you install this particular plugin and you want to open it, you can just right click and click on the open with live server. So a port will be open for this, as you can see, like port 5500, and it you can view it on the web browser, right? And one more plugin, which is Emmet. Emmet is a very nice plugin, although like the direct Emmet support is not provided for the VS Code. Instead, it is a third-party plugin. So if we see about like what Emmet is, it's basically an essential toolkit which enhances the productivity while you are writing the HTML code. You can consider it as a shorthand, right? Okay, so let's say, yeah, so let's say if you have to create this HTML, you can just create it by using this short abbreviations and it will output accordingly. So let's say if we want to create something, some tags, let's say if we want to define this, right, UL inside the li tags, so we can just make use of UL li, and we want the li tag to be 5 tags, li5, which further contains anchor tag, maybe with hyper reference, and which further contains the content, right? So now we can see, right? So it is generated according to my abbreviations. So we have the li tag and the anchor tags, right? So like when you see about the emit, you have to go through the documentation so that you can get used to it. Initially, it might be get some confusing how to generate the HTML using the emit, but when you get the hands-on experience with it, you can generate all the necessary layout very easily, and it will also reduce time so that you don't have to write all the tags manually, right? So it is rendered accordingly. So I guess we have covered all the topics we had. So if any of you guys have any sort of questions regarding the session, we can have it. Okay, so when should we use CSS frameworks? Whenever it is required, whenever you want to give some styling to your web pages, I guess. Font size topic 2. No, like if you want to give the styling to the paragraph tag, this is not the way. Like if you have some limited tags, then you can give it. Otherwise, the internal CSS or the external CSS is much more preferred, right? Because like maintaining the code, giving the inline CSS won't work out if you have a very large project or something like that. So we are going to talk about the CSS in the next session, which we are going to like host it tomorrow, I guess. Right. Okay. And if you guys just yeah, and if you guys I guess want to go in depth in the HTML, about the HTML, yeah, you can check out this course, which is by the Geeks for Geeks and the experts. So you can go through this course if you want to get the in-depth knowledge of the HTML and about the HTML. Right. Okay, great. Okay, so I guess we are all done with this session, and I guess I have answered all the questions that is being asked. And okay, so the next session is going to be tomorrow at the same time. In that particular session, we are going to talk about the CSS, the basics of CSS, and different type of like how can we give styling to our web pages, right? So yeah, it is going to be fun, hopefully. So I guess we can wrap this session. Hopefully, this session is productive for you guys as well. So bye, guys. Stay safe. Let's meet tomorrow. All right. Bye.